going to just reverse the process and being very careful to now we'll get our number 1 lined up here with our number 1 tip. And the reason that, well, is important that you have this aligned before you there's little recesses in the end here that those Allen screws on the end of that collar are seated up in that little recess, and so after you go so low you can't rotate it, you know, because the head of the screw will be in the way. So, you know, back here somewhere, then you get lined up with your number 1 rotary transformer with the number 1 head, and then you seat it. And it's also a good idea to back this off, this adjustment here, as to not, you know, put a lot of pressure on anything inside for no good reason. And of course we'll adjust that when we are on the machine and able to spin the head by hand at first, and then once you get it set about mid-range to where there's nothing raking or rubbing, then you can start the head turning, you know, apply the power and run it up to speed. And it's always a good idea is to find out where the limits are when it's standing still, so you know not to go too far and crash it into the adjacent transformer surface. That's not a good thing to do when you're at speed. This is this machine screw has a shoulder on it, and that fixes its position, you know, its mechanical position. And so once you tighten it down, or maybe just to where they come together, you know, and not tighten it, you can notice at the bottom you have a little bit of travel. And I try to get right in the middle of that travel, and then I'll snug the bottom screw down, and then come back to the top and finish it. This is the part I have to sit down for. Those wires are very, very tiny. And you need to be very steady. Which is something I'm not. I really don't like to add solder because that affects the balance somewhat. But once in a while, you know, it becomes necessary to, so I try to do it very sparingly, just to not throw the balance off too much. inspect that. Make sure we don't have any bad connections. Okay, I think we got it. Something I always like to do whenever I have to remove the preamp, unplug it, is inspect these pins in the little Winchester connector here. They are very, very delicate, and once in a while one of them will get bent over a little bit to one side, and when you go to plug the preamp back in, it'll get smushed, and that ain't good. Okay, looks like we're all right. So, a little trick here when you're going to reinstall your preamp is these little screws that are recessed. They're captive screws, and they won't fall out, or usually they won't. Some of them do. But they're kind of aggravating because when you invert the preamp, they want to fall down and get in the way. So what I like to do is push down on the end of those screws and back them out about one turn down into the threads, and they'll sit there. They won't fall down and get in the way when you're trying to plug in the preamp. And that's really aggravating when you're trying to be careful and make sure you're getting the plug, you know, centered, and so that helps when you do that. It gets those screws, and these also on the side. That keeps them up out of the way when you're trying to concentrate on this connector. And other thing that I'd like to do whenever I take one of these off is once in a while you get an intermittent here on one of these little contact points on this little printed circuit. These made up with these fingers here, and see, that's kind of a springy piece, and so a pencil eraser, just the rubber end of a pencil eraser, I just like to go over the contacts and shine them up a little bit, and likewise on the little circuit board here, shine those contacts up. And this is the DC power, the two wires coming there to the preamp, and that's this little board on the bottom here with the transistors. and the other two sends power over to the little circuit board on the end of the motor, the back end of the head, that is the tack pulse amplifier. So, once in a while you'll get a little intermittent there. So I always like to clean those before I reconnect. Alright, so you find the get centered over the connector, and then you gently press it down, seat it, and I like to turn the head up and look right there, and you can see if it's together and if it's lined up, and that's a good indication that everything went back together without any problem. And I'm not tightening these screws, I'm getting them started in the threads. And then we'll come back and check the position, make sure everything is going together properly, and then we'll tighten them down. Alright, feels about right. Looks good. Nice and snug and everything fits.